Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/ProRevenge. Not going to pay overtime? Think again. I was discussing this sub with a good friend and he said, "Boy, have I got a story that'll fit." It wasn't his story, but his brother's, and I sat with him and got the details. Buckle up, it's a good one, and a long one. Let's call him Bob. Bob has been fiddling with computers since he was a kid and knows them pretty well. As with most people, he's moved from job to job. The employer he worked for was a service distribution company, and there were 2 employees. The company was located in Ontario, Canada. About 3 years ago, Bob's employer decided to modernize their software. They had separate programs for dispatching, for inventory, for payroll and finances, and it was complicated moving information from one program to the other. They decided to get an ERP Enterprise Resource Planning program, and Bob recommended one that he knew inside out from a previous employer. For those of you who don't know, an ERP program handles everything: purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers, all of it. You can run a report and find out which customer has bought the most part ABC in the last year, which salesman has improved his numbers the most, which vendor has the fastest delivery time, which shipper packed the most orders. Everyone in the company used the ERP program, but it was very complicated, and they used the aspects of it that related to their position. For example, the receiver would accept a shipment, verify the quantity, confirm it was received, and the inventory stats would be available to the salespeople if they wanted to look up how many were on hand. The receiver didn't care what the price was or who the vendor was, he just did his job. Bob was run ragged during the implementation process, but he managed to train most of the employees on their aspects, and after a few months, everything was running fairly smoothly. Bob still got tickets for tweaks in the operation of the software and occasional hardware issues. Then the company decided to expand their footprint and was marketing into different time zones. That messed things up. Atlantic Canada is 90 minutes early, so if someone sent an email or an order at 8 am their time, it would arrive at 6:30 am Ontario time. Pacific Canada is 3 hours late, so an email sent at 3 p.m. Vancouver time would arrive at 6 p.m. This stretched out the day, so many staff came in early and worked late. Bob would arrive at 8 am, and there would be people that demanded his immediate assistance and were annoyed that he didn't respond instantly, even though their request was submitted before his start time. Same with late in the day, his phone would ring at dinner time with people that wanted help right now. They decided to stagger his and his colleagues' shift times. Bob would start at 6 am and work till 2:30, and his colleague would start at 10:30 am and work till 7 p.m. Bob's colleague had kids and refused the shift change. The employer insisted. The colleague quit. That meant that Bob was the only person in the department. The employer said they would look to hire a new guy, but they had trouble finding one that knew the ERP system, and they were offering well under a market value salary. Bob asked for a raise and was denied. Then he wanted overtime, and the employer told him that as an IT specialist, he was exempt from overtime laws in Ontario. Bob looked it up, and the employer was correct. This went on for some time, and he knew lots of people socially. They told him what the company was offering, and Bob knew that they wouldn't find another tech. Things went downhill from there. Bob would get chewed out if he missed a call or an email, no matter what time it came in. He had to train new hires in the ERP system, as well as take care of the hardware. He asked repeatedly for better compensation, and was denied, so he planned to get a new job. Now here's the revenge. Bob had access to the entirety of the ERP program. When a user signed in, the time was logged, and even if they didn't sign out, after 15 minutes it would log them out anyway. Everyone in the company was on salary, and many of them came in early and stayed late. Ontario labor law states that even salaried workers are entitled to overtime after 44 hours a week, unless they were managers or supervisors. So Bob jumped into the program and ran a report for each employee that wasn't a manager, all the way back to when the ERP program was started. Then he reached out to an employment lawyer and got the okay to refer employees to him. Bob lined up another job, and after he left, every employee in the company got an email with an Excel sheet showing the hours they had put in past 44 hours a week. The subject line said, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." In the body of the email was the lawyer's name. The crap hit the fan. Almost every employee authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf, and the company had to pay a ton of money. All the company had to do was pay Bob for the extra work he put in. Instead, they had to pay almost everyone. Next story. Steal furniture. Almost lose your job. So my dad owns a house that he's been renting for some time now. The tenants that lived there were, for the most part, decent people who my dad thought were trustworthy. That all changed about 2 months into the tenancy when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay up what was owed. They didn't pay a thing. By this point, my dad, frustrated by the whole situation and being 2 months out of rent money, offered them a deal. Leave the house ASAP and then only pay half the money owed. They countered with a different agreement. They would leave the house in a clean state with all of their furniture left behind as compensation. My dad, wanting to just be done with them, agreed. Cue to when my dad gets to the house, finding the place in a mess, with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. When my dad confronted them asking for them to pay up the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks, which he didn't believe, and when he requested they pay earlier, he was met with "good luck getting your money" followed by laughing emojis. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor of a church, and his son also had some job related to the church. My dad contacted the church and explained everything from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. The church was somewhat interested about this behavior. The next day, my dad gets an angry phone call from the tenant's son cursing at him and asking him what he thought he was doing contacting the church, saying he was being unfair. My dad hung up on him only for him to attempt to ring 10 times after he hung up. From what we could piece together, the church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, him and his son would lose their jobs. My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. My dad later said it was never about the money, but the way this guy treated him and his values. My dad, being a Christian himself, was disappointed. Next story. Say goodbye to your house and your retirement. This one is not technically my revenge, but some revenge I got to see up close and take joy from and slightly participate in. The background is most of the story, so this will be a little long. Trigger warning for self-harm. I was in the Navy and stationed on the submarine base in Connecticut. I had a friend I met in boot camp, and we were in the same class for our school Navy job training. We'll call that friend Bill. Now, Bill wasn't the most physically fit guy. He was short, kind of chubby, and wore glasses. However, Bill was really smart, and as the sonar technician he was meant to be, he would have been amazing. He had a pragmatic way of looking at things I really valued in a friend, and I know it would have made him successful if he had made it out to the fleet. While in school, we had a couple of petty officers that were hard butts. They somehow convinced themselves they were super soldiers despite the fact that our jobs in that field are really nerd-centric. You get picked for that job because of your math and computer skills, not your deadlift number. Still, they were both all about being fit and working out all the time. We would do physical training 3 times a week, and while most of us could keep up, Bill often fell behind on runs or didn't quite meet what these 2 idiots believed to be the standard. To be clear, Bill did pass the minimum requirements for fitness. He just didn't go as extreme as these guys. Side note for other Navy vets. He got the McPawn coin for how hard he pushed himself at PT the day he visited. The end result was that they would constantly berate and belittle Bill. They'd call him fat, lazy, and everything else. They'd tell him he should kill himself, you name it. They were always on his butt despite him passing his assessments. At some point, Bill pushed himself too hard and injured his knee. He told these petty officers he was injured and had been seen by the doc on base. The doc had put him on light duty so the knee could recover. He had the paperwork to back it up. They elected to ignore that and threaten him with kicking him out if he didn't do the workouts. So Bill kept pushing himself, injuring himself more, and his mental health degraded the whole time. In my time in the Navy, you didn't get mental health services really. The only person to talk to like that was the chaplain. For those who don't know, the chaplain is the religious leader, usually a pastor/priest/rabbi that has signed up as a commissioned officer. Our chaplain was the sweetest little woman you ever met, but as a chaplain she held the rank of captain high-ranking officer. So Bill set up a meeting with the chaplain to talk about things. When Bill informed the petty officers he would be missing class the next day for his chaplain meeting, they yelled at and berated him more. They called him a useless, not fit for the Navy, and everything else you can imagine. They convinced Bill he was being weak and the chaplain wouldn't care about his issues, that nobody would care. They promised to make life even harder if he didn't show the next day, so he canceled his meeting. Evidently, bad luck hit, and that night his girlfriend was also breaking it off with him. She wasn't worth his time or money, but he couldn't see that. That night I awoke to a 3 a.m. call from Bill. I couldn't hear anything and I asked several times, "Bill, you there? Are you okay?" It wouldn't have been the first time that I got a drunk dial from one of my friends after a hard day like Bill had. Sailors have been known to drown their sorrows a bit. Eventually, I figured it was a butt dial/drunk dial and hung up and went back to bed. I still regret that decision. The next day, all hell broke loose. Me and a couple other friends got calls from Bill's, now ex-girlfriend, informing us he was in the hospital because he slit his own throat. Turned out a few of us got that 3 a.m. call, but Bill couldn't speak at the time and was kind of out of it due to blood loss. We finished what we had to do on base and rushed over to the hospital. As we got there, the chaplain was on her way out and we passed her in the hallway. She spoke to us briefly to say that Bill would be okay, and she wouldn't forget this. I have never seen a look on someone's face that so accurately depicted raw, unfiltered rage. It took us all by surprise because she was such a small, sweet, and personable lady. But the look in her eyes, you could just tell she wanted someone to pay for this. She wanted revenge, and we all knew she wore the kind of rank that could get it done. We visited Bill, who could barely talk, but he told us the story of what had happened, what he was thinking at the time, and how glad he was it didn't work. Apparently, it was cold enough that the blood clotted on the outside of his neck and made a kind of patch that kept him alive long enough for the ends to find him and get him to a hospital. The doctor said he missed his carotid by about a millimeter. A week went by, and we hadn't heard anything until we got called in by the chief of the training command, the boss to these petty officers. He said he wanted to check on the rest of us and make sure there weren't any other issues with these guys he wasn't aware of, and that we were all okay. I let him know about an butt chewing he gave me a few months back, that I was really set up by these guys and they had lied to him. My friends cited a couple other examples of their own, with these guys being generally crappy, dishonest people. I don't think it mattered. I think their fates were already sealed and we were being asked for more ammo to bury them with. The next day they were nowhere to be found and we were introduced to new instructors who would be taking over our training permanently. After class, I decided to stop by and ask the chaplain what happened. She told me she had never been more disgusted by the actions of a sailor than these two guys who convinced someone not to come see her. She teared up a bit, regretting that she didn't get the chance to help Bill before he made his attempt. In her mind, it was these two that precipitated and enabled Bill's attempt. So on to the revenge. The chaplain told me she went to the admiral in charge of the entire base and demanded their immediate discharge. He granted it. Both petty officers were immediately processed out with dishonorable discharges. I can't remember the exact charge I heard they cited for it, but I know the Navy has a way of selling BS on paper when they want a certain outcome, especially officers at that high level. So basically, they get no VA benefits of any kind, got kicked out of the base housing they lived in, and could probably only find work at a gas station or under-the-table stuff somewhere. Also, I know from someone else who got the boot that the Navy only pays for a single bus ticket to get you back home, not your family or any of your belongings. When you have a discharge like that, no company with DoD contracts is allowed to hire you. That includes McDonald's because they have stores on bases throughout the country. Taco Bell, Subway, etc. None of them will give you a job. They can't, and they don't want to anyway. So I don't know where these guys went or what become of them, but I know their lives were irrevocably ruined. One of them had about 18 years in, so he was 2 years from retirement and lost it all. The other was at about 12 years, so he also lost a lot. Wherever they are now, I'd be very surprised to hear they're making more than minimum wage. As for Bill, well, he made a full recovery. He got a full medical discharge, which is an honorable discharge that meant E5 pay for the rest of his life, full benefits, and a referral to a counselor in his home state once he got back there. All paid for by the Navy. We lost touch over the years, but I did see on Facebook he got himself together, became a police officer, and got married. Edit to add. For those who have pointed it out, their discharges were actually off, but I didn't want to have to explain the difference or have people Google it. We always use dishonorable colloquially for off-bitty because they all mean you got the boot and your life is gonna suck. But no, they didn't do full CM or any brig time, but I did hear they pushed it to ASP and lost. Also saw someone pointed out Bill wouldn't get the medical at 100% for his neck. That's also true, he wouldn't have, but they wrote it up for his knee cause it was basically bone on bone inside. I think they decided to do him a favor and not put him down as a mental health discharge. Next story. It ProRevenge on cheating wife. Someone posted a story earlier that was a bit too close to a true story that I was involved in. I previously shared it as a comment in another sub and thought I'd share the real story. This takes place before smartphones were omnipresent. I had a friend, we'll call him Bob, that was suspicious of his wife's social circle. One of her closest friends had been caught cheating and tried to throw her under the bus as well. Bob had no proof and things settled down for a while. Bob was a NIT professional and very good with PCS and networks. Nearly a year later, Bob's wife is acting shady again after her high school reunion. He confides in me and we talked through some scenarios. He jokingly mentioned a keylogger. He finally asked me to just drop it and most of all, don't tell anyone, not even your wife. A couple months pass and I'm up early, 5:36, getting ready for work. I get a Facebook Messenger notification and see that I've been sent a link from Bob, but it's a group chat. It's literally everyone we know, her family, his family, our friends, strangers, everyone. I didn't open it. It looked like a phishing link even though it came from him who's extremely cautious. A short while later I get an email from Bob with some ominous and savory comments and the same link. It's a group email with the recipients open copied. His wife's work, her family, her friends, his family, other people I didn't know. I knew it was legitimate now, so I opened it. The link was to a hastily made website containing pictures and videos of his wife and another man. This wasn't hidden camera footage. It was screenshots including video screen captures. Weeks worth of screenshots. He had captioned each item with snarky comments and colorful names for his wife and her lover. It was an embarrassing amount of evidence. Videos of her masturbating with her lover. Chat logs about how they can't wait to F again. Solo masturbation videos of her and him. Tons of pictures. And the straw that broke the camel's back. Trash talking her husband to her lover. Comments about how much bigger and better he was. Her efforts to stroke her lover's ego were especially hurtful. I dropped what I was doing and called him. He was drunk and combative. He had been up all night making the website and drowning in liquor. Not one good word to say about women in general. He was extremely emotional, but after some work I had convinced him to take the website down before it does irreparable damage to his marriage, their careers, and his children. As he's sobbing and logging in to remove the website, I hear loud yelling as she bursts into the room. A screaming match ensues, and there's nothing I can do to pull him back. Apparently, her mother or sister saw the page, blew up her phone until she woke up and answered. She saw the website and went on the offensive. The phone call drops after 30 seconds of her screaming, while Bob is calling her a bad woman, and I can't contact him again. The website was still up for the rest of the day, and he was kind enough to put a view counter on it. Hundreds of people watched her masturbating with a married former classmate. Bob had done his homework. He installed a keylogger that records the whole screen. When he was out, she would log into the PC and/or Facebook and play with her boyfriend. Bob had found her lover, his family, his wife's family, his job, etc., etc. All these people were included in the Facebook and email groups. I do not know what became of her lover and his marriage, but I do know what happened to Bob's life. His wife was desperate to make amends. She tried and offered everything. In the end, it was her comments about her lover and his prowess that were her undoing. Bob tried to take her back, even after all his friends and family had seen her naked and cheating. But he couldn't get over the comments about his manhood. Bob eventually left her, gained about 100 pounds, and then finally moved as far away as possible and became a horrible human being. I have no idea what he's doing now, as he went scorched earth with most friendships and his family. She's gross and has a face shaped like a bowling ball now. Line forms at the rear. TLDR, former friend sets a trap for his unsuspecting cheating wife. He then shares all the pictures and videos with her friends, family, employer, as well as the boyfriend's wife, family, and employer. Many lives ruined. Edited for clarity. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel. Our posts